So tonight we find ourselves in Joshua chapter 6. And I'm not sure we're going to get done with chapter 6 tonight. Maybe we will. An extended time prayer request, which is good. But this is the conquest of Jericho. And this is where, last week we talked about Israel being circumcised. And, when they came over and came across the Jordan River, they had to get right. They had to get themselves right and be in a right standing before God. And, that had to happen. It was a prime opportunity for them just to go on the attack. But like I said last week, if they had attacked Jericho and they had not been right with God, that would have been disastrous. It would have been a terrible, terrible thing. Well, they did it. They did it right. They had to pass over. And we saw the end of chapter 5 that Joshua met the captain of the Lord's army. And we agreed that was Jesus. We talked through, well, I don't know if you agreed with me or not, but I told you that's what I thought. I think that's who he was talking to, was Jesus, pre-incarnate Christ. But we roll into chapter 6 now, is the conquest. And let's just look at the verses real quick. It says, "Now Jericho was tightly shut because of the sons of Israel. No one went out, no one came in." Okay, we know this when they came across to spy out the land. Rahab told them, man, they're scared. And then last week it said that the kings in that area had lost their strength. They had no spirit left in them. Their hearts were melted. All right, so they were tightened up, man. They had boarded up the walls, the windows, and locked the doors, and deadbolted, and cut the security system on, and got the Rottweilers out. They were ready, right? They were holed up. They didn't want Jericho to be taken. They didn't want sons of Israel to come in. So they were on lockdown. But the Lord said to Joshua in verse 2, "See, I have given Jericho into your hand, with its king and the valiant warriors. You shall march around the city, all the men of war, circling the city once. You shall do this for 6 days." Okay? "Also the 7 priests shall carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. Then on the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priest shall blow the trumpets." Now let's stop right there. We'll break this down as we go. Check out this strategy. Okay, they're holed up, they're locked down, they're scared. 6 days we're going to march our army all the way around the walls. No surprise attack. We're going to march. We're going to show off our army all the way around the wall of the city for 6 days in a row. Intimidation, maybe. I'm not sure what the point there was. But look at what happens on the 7th day. It said on the 7th day, you're going to march around, and the priests are going to blow the trumpets. It's almost like, okay, here's something new. They got the trumpets out, right? So it's almost like you're telling them, here we come, right? Verse 5, "It shall be that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat, and people will go up every man straight ahead." Now that seems like an easy way to attack a city. I'm not sure if that would work today, but without the help of the Lord, that would be a pretty terrible strategy. We're going to walk around 6 times to intimidate you, but we're going to give you time to kind of scope us out and find out what we got. And then the 7th day, we're going to walk around and blow the horn, and all we're going to do is shout at you. Right? And the walls are going to come tumbling down. Well, that's what they did. So Joshua in verse 6 says, "Son of Nun called the priests and said to them, 'Take up the ark of the covenant, and let 7 priests carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord.' And then he said to the people, 'Go forward and march around the city, and let the armed men go before the ark of the Lord.' And it was so that when Joshua had spoken to the people, the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the Lord went forward and blew the trumpets, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed them. The armed men went before the priests who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard came after the ark while they continued to blow the trumpets. But Joshua commanded the people, saying, You shall not shout, nor let your voice be heard, nor let a word proceed out of your mouth, until the day I tell you, shout. Then you will shout. So he had the ark of the Lord taken around the city, circling it once. Then they came into camp and spent the night in camp. Joshua rose early the next morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord. 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets of ram's horn before the ark of the Lord went on continually and blew the trumpets, and the armed men went before them, and the rear guard came after the ark of the Lord. And while they continued to blow the trumpets, thus the second day they marched around the city once and returned to the camp and did this for 6 days. So they followed the Lord. The only thing they did was blow the trumpets, marching around the city. Verse 15, Then on the 7th day they arose early at the dawning of the day and marched around the city in the same manner 7 times. Only on that day they marched around the city 7 times. At the 7th time, when the priest blew the trumpet, Joshua said to the people, Shout, for the Lord has given you the city. The city shall be under the ban, and all that is in it belongs to the Lord. Only Rahab the harlot and all who were with her in the house shall live, because she hid the messengers whom we sent. But as for you, only keep yourselves from the things under the ban, so that you do not covet them and take some of the things under the ban, and make the camp of Israel accursed and bring trouble into it. Gold and articles of bronze and iron are holy to the Lord, and they shall go into the treasury of the Lord. So the people shouted, and priests blew the trumpets. And when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, the people shouted with a great shout, and the wall fell down flat up into the city, every man straight ahead, and they took the city. They utterly destroyed everything in the city, both man and woman, young and old, ox and sheep and donkey, with the edge of the sword. Joshua said to the 2 men who had spied out the land, Go into the harlot's house and bring the woman and all she has out of there, as you have sworn to her. So the young men who were spies went in and brought out Rahab and her father and her mother and her brothers and all she had. They also brought out all her relatives and placed them outside of the camp of Israel. They burned the city with fire and all that was in it. Only the silver and gold and articles of bronze and iron they put into the treasury of the house of the Lord. However, Rahab the harlot and her father's household and all she had, Joshua spared, and she has lived in the midst of Israel to this day. For she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. Then Joshua made them take an oath at that time, saying, Cursed before the Lord is the man who rises up and builds this city Jericho. With the loss of his firstborn he shall lay its foundation. With the loss of his youngest son he shall set up its gates. So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame was in all the land. Now, you've heard that and you've read that. There's songs about it. Joshua fit the battle around Jericho. 7 times, blow the horn, walls come tumbling down, right? One of the more gruesome aspects of this that we tend to kind of gloss over in our children's sermons are the fact that they killed everybody in town. I mean, they took them out. They wiped them out. And today, that seems a little harsh. That seems, in our society today, that seems kind of, it seems a little extreme, right? But, in this time, this is what conquest was. And either you were for the Lord or you were against the Lord. And these people were against the Lord. And they were not followers of God. And we know that at the end of the days, God's going to take the goats, put them on one side, and he's going to put the sheep and put them on the other side. And the sheep are going to be ushered up into heaven. We're going to reign with Jesus, and we're going to be his joint heirs. And the goats will be led off into eternal torment. So, we don't see a lot of conquest today. I think the Crusades kind of put a stop to that, the Christian Crusades. We don't really see that much anymore. We don't see, especially here in America, what we would call a holy war. You see that across the pond. You see that in the Middle East. I mean, they're fighting that all the time. And this stuff still happens. It still happens in the name of Allah, and it still happens, in the Muslim religion. They want jihad. They want to fight Christians, and they want to come kill Christians, and they want to kill infidels, which they think Christians are infidels. They still hold to that. And we're coming to a point to where, I don't know when it's going to be, but when Jesus comes back and reigns, There's going to be destruction on this earth again. There's going to be this type of conquest. People are going to die. Things are going to be destroyed, and that's just not something we like to talk about. That's an Old Testament thing it's not comfortable to talk about, but it's part of what this is. And ultimately, this is going to be a theocracy. Right now, it's a democratic republic that we live in here in the United States. I guess that's still what we have. But one day, it's going to be a theocracy. One day, God's going to come back and reign. I don't have president. I don't have Congress, thank the Lord. I'm not going to just send the House of Representatives. We're going to be gone. We're not going to answer to governors, and we're going to answer to Jesus. And there is coming a time when this is going to happen again. But this is hard to read, and it's hard to think about that. God's people would come in and absolutely destroy a nation. But that's this. To destroy the Egyptians. God destroyed the Egyptians in the sea, in the Red Sea. They destroyed this nation, and this is going to be a pattern all the way up until David. David is really the last warrior king that's going to come and fight on God's behalf, and then his son Solomon is going to experience a relatively good time of peace. But then his Solomon's sons are going to experience, they're going to lead the nations into decline to the point where it's going to end up being death. The nations are going to go off into captivity, and it's going to be a bad thing. So this is just the beginning of conquest for the children of Israel. But this is fulfilling a promise that God made. God told them at Abraham, I'm giving you this land. And what happened here at Jericho, as gruesome as it was, as bloody as it was, and as bad as it was the fulfillment of a promise that God made to his people. And, how in the world can we take the Battle of Jericho and apply that to where we are today? We don't walk around killing people that are not Christians. We don't go around and crusade like this. We don't go around and conquer. It's a different time that we live in. But how do we take and apply this? Well, for one, I want you to look at the principle of what God did with the wall. The strategy is not our strategy. It's not a wartime strategy. I don't think you would. You wouldn't find that in the military book. You wouldn't go parade people around 7 days and go around everybody there, advance. That's probably not a good modern day strategy. But, our strategy is not the Lord's strategy. And I think what he's showing us here is that his ways are not our ways. And that with him, we can do things that we absolutely do not believe that we can do. And they conquered that city. They knocked that wall down with their words. Can you imagine the physical activity it would have taken to either scale the wall or, with the tools that they had? They didn't have big cannons and 50 caliber machine guns and things that we got now. Bunker busters and things like that. They couldn't have just went in there and bombed them, and then went in and took over. They would have had to physically knock the walls down to go in. And that was exerted energy that would have taken away from the fight. God did it for them. And so the principle is still holds today. God will fight our battles for us. If we will let him, if we will trust him, if we will put our faith in him. And as Johnny Hunt used to say, man, when he came to speak to us at Chapel in Southeast, stay close and clean. Stay close and clean. Close to the Lord and stay clean. Keep yourself right. And that's the thing that Joshua, he prepared the army before this fight to and when you're close and when you're clean, the Lord's going to fight your battles. Okay? And so that's one lesson to take out of this. And the other is the thing with Rahab. We studied about Rahab and learned when we talked about her that she chose God. To serve the Lord and to help the Lord rather not that he needed her. Okay, that's not. He didn't need her help. Okay, but she chose his side. She chose to be on the right side of it, and she chose God. Her family was spared. Not only was her family spared, she ended up being elevated to Jesus Christ. She was Boaz's mother. So When you turn to Matthew and look at the genealogy of Jesus, you find Rahab the harlot's name, which is astonishing to me. That and that's just here's another thing. A little self-deprecating. If we had to put, that book, The Scarlet Letter, and it's been 100 years since I've read that. But I believe the adulteress had to wear the red A, the Scarlet Letter. Right? If we had to advertise our sin, okay, and we had to wear that sign around our neck who we were. Poor Rahab here has been stuck with this moniker, Rahab the harlot, for a couple of thousand years. Okay, she was probably, we talked about this, was probably not a harlot at the time. She was probably not a practicing harlot at the time of this. Okay, but she got stuck with the name Rahab the harlot. Can you imagine living your life? If people called you by name and they would say, "Hey, Steve the glutton, how you doing?" I can't really hide that when it's coming out here. But I mean, think about that. Whatever your vice is, if that became your name, so and so the adulterer, so and so the murderer, so and so the, whatever. The liar. It's stuck with her. No matter what your sin is, in God's eyes, can overcome it. She may have been Rahab the harlot to the people of Jericho. To God, she was Rahab, mother of Boaz. Rahab, the part of the lineage in which I'm going to send my son, my perfect, only begotten son that will live a sinless life, will die a gruesome death, and will redeem the entire world. He's going to come from the lineage. Right. Absolutely right. David's name's in there too. Absolutely right. So, a couple of things you can take out of this, that kind of makes it a little easier to digest with all brutality and conquest. I'm not saying gloss over that or look beyond that, but those things are necessary to root out evil and to destroy evil, which ultimately the world that we live in, the new heaven and the new earth, there's not going to be any evil. Okay? And Jesus is going to come and annihilate that. And you mentioned a while ago we go about living our way, and you kind of forget that people with COVID are having a hard time, and nursing homes are still no touch. People have gone. I talked to somebody today, a friend of mine, that great Christian people. They haven't been to church since because of this COVID stuff. So, I tend to, it shocked me in a way because I thought, this thing, maybe we're doing things that other people aren't doing. We kind of get the world routines or whatever. And sometimes we don't think about what it took for the kingdom of God to get the kingdom. Sometimes we don't think about that David went out and took armies and just obliterated them. Well, that's part of the history of Christianity in this world. But it's part of, and I guess a better way to put it would be, it's part of the pursuit of holiness in this world. It's part of the conquest to eradicate evil out of this world. And part of that conquest is going to be, by default, violence and bloodshed. It's just going to be part of what it is. But don't forget the other parts of this. The fact that God is in control, that He can fight our battles, and that your sin is not greater than your Savior. And you may carry that name with you, and people may call you, and they may think things about you, but I've learned in my 47 plus years on this earth, I really don't care what people say about me. I really don't. I mean, you either like me or you don't. You listen to me or you don't. You, you be my friend or not. I don't care. Um, I have one person that I aim to please, and that's Jesus. The second person I aim to please is my wife and my daughter. Beyond that, I love y'all and I love y'all like family, but your approval is not necessary for my survival. His approval is essential for my survival. And I hope that you say the same thing. And I love all of you. Okay? But whether you approve of me or not, it doesn't move the needle. It's whether or not God approves of me. So, don't let your sin diminish the stature of your God. Because your God is bigger than your sin. Rahab may have been on that part of the end of the verse, Rahab Boaz lineage of Jesus. Man, what a blessing that was, right? What a blessing she turned out to be. So don't be down on yourself. Right? Stay close and stay clean. Anybody got any questions? And if you go back to Exodus, okay, Joshua and Caleb were two spies that spied out originally. Okay, they're the ones that spied out. They were only 2 out of 12 that came to do that. The other 10 were like, no, they're like, man, they're like grasshoppers. They're huge. And they got us great sure land flowing with honey, but they got some big folks over yonder, and I don't see how they want to fight. The other 10 did like that. I don't see that with Joshua. You got to take these movies with a grain of salt, man. When you watch a biblical movie, even if it's a biblical movie about biblical things, you got to take it with a grain of salt. You got to go back to the scripture. I don't see that with Joshua. Knowing what we've read so far, now is it true that God's going to fight our battles for us? Absolutely. I mean, that's exactly what we just talked about. But to portray Joshua as passive, as saying, "Hey, I'm really non-violent, anti-war pacifist." Yeah, I don't know, man. I think this would be an interpretation that I probably would do. I think Joshua was probably. Sure. Absolutely right. So the question was Joshua passive? And he's portrayed in the movie as being a passive leader, maybe a non-violent person that says, "Hey, God's going to fight a battle for us." I think he was much more. He definitely was a leader, and he was revered. God, look, he sent them in there. It says they utterly destroyed everything in the city under his leadership. I mean, the fact that God's going to fight our battles, yes, that is a true statement. No, I wouldn't categorize him as passive. Anybody else? Gideon strikes me as a whole lot more passive up front than Joshua. Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that up front. I need to go back and read that again. But from what I remember about Gideon, yeah, I would say Gideon was probably a lot more passive than Joshua. I just don't see that with Joshua. But he ended up being a warrior too. I think he was skittish maybe. He didn't want to do it the wrong way. All right, anybody else? Another minute or two here. That sounds familiar, and that sounds like something God will say. I don't know the chapter and verse either, but okay. But now look at what we talked about. So the verse is something like, "Don't gloat over the punishment of the wicked," right? That's exactly, absolutely right. And if you go further into Samuel Kings and Chronicles, what you see is, and I can't recall right now where it's at exactly, but there was sin in the camp at Ai. Okay, there was sin in the camp at Ai. Okay, and that's exactly what happened. They were told, "Don't take anything. Don't, when we go and when we conquer, you don't take anything." Somebody took something, right? And they found it. And when they did, if I remember, it's been a while since I've read it. I remember by an earthquake, the ground opened up and split open and sucked them down in there. I mean, so that was the punishment for them gloating. I'm gonna have to go back and look that up. I'll have that next Wednesday night for you. I don't remember. My memory is not as my remember is not as good as my forgetter. So you might be right, Barry. I don't know. They might have took them. I think they took them out of the camp. But if I'm not mistaken, the earth opened up and swallowed them up. I might be. I'll go back and look it up next week. We'll answer that. Yeah, I could be too. I've not read that part in a while. I don't have that memorized chapter and verse. So. All right. We'll close this out with a word of prayer. Thank y'all for coming tonight. I really appreciate the feedback. Good to have everybody here tonight. Father, thank you for the night. Thank you for the word. Lord, we do know that you are going to fight our battles for us and that you're going to help go before us and take care of some of these things. And Father, for that we are very grateful. Sometimes these fights can get very difficult, and we know we can relish in the fact that you are on our side and that you're for us. And if you're for us, then who can be against us? Lord, bless us as we go our separate ways and bring us back